what about the things that are happening, on the streets in Orlando? Is with George Floyd being actually, I was going to say murdered.
He
His
was.
life was taken from him, and it was really, really tragic. And it's really sparked off a tremendous backlash all over the country, and even here in London yesterday, there was, people that were demonstrating peacefully, may I say, thank God. But so, what's your take on what's happening there in Central Florida?
Even in Orlando, we had protesters yesterday during the day. But of course, the criminal elements come out at night, like Antifa. And they're being paid to do these things. And of course, you have people who are simply greedy, trying to take advantage of a situation which has nothing to do with their actions whatsoever. You cannot link these people who are looting and having violent protests with people who are peacefully simply giving their opinions on what should have been done, what could have been done. Mr. Floyd was murdered. There's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. Now, it wasn't murder necessarily in the first degree, because the police officers, if they didn't know him, couldn't be first degree. But I think his charges should have been higher than they are. And I think that they may be increased later.
Right. But I mean, the fact is that this has been building up over many years, and we've had too many cases, with something similar happening. Again, almost choked to death a few years ago. And there's always a reaction, like the Black Lives Matter. So, I mean, how are you going to handle it? How is Trump going to handle it? Because some of his rhetoric is not very well phrased, to say the least.
Unfortunately, I would have to agree with that. The fact of the matter is, of course, what we need is proper education, instead of those who are trying to tear down democracy, tear down capitalism, trying to use a false concept of race to divide people. We need to instead simply educate people from a creation standpoint, that all humans are humans. The fact that different people are of different color, there's no such thing as different races. We've discussed that before. We are one human race.
Yeah.
You cannot blame social issues on color in these modern days. Now, there was a time, of course, when that was an issue, but today that's not the issue. Today it's poor education.
And just from a biblical point of view, obviously, we all can be traced back to Ham, Shem, and Japheth, sons
and
of
eventually
Noah.
to Adam and Eve. We all start with Adam and Eve.
Of course.
We all start with three sons of Noah and their three wives, whatever their names were. But we are all one human race. We can marry across any ethnicity. We can give organ transplants across any ethnicity. But the difference of color, the difference of ear shape, nose shape, stature, etc., this is just ethnicity within one human race.
So do you think that racism then is still prevalent in the police force in America?
You can't paint with a 100% brush, obviously. And we know now from the records of the 4 policemen who were involved that these were troubled policemen to begin with. And the one who murdered Mr. Floyd had the worst record of the 4. Why didn't the other 3 stop him? Why didn't the crowd, cry out for him to be released? After all, he was under control before he went to the ground.
I know, yeah. Which makes the matter worse. And this is why people are just so upset, because there was no reason at all to use that amount of force.
I cannot be the judge of Mr. Floyd based upon what I know at the moment. He may have been a very minor, very petty criminal, but he was murdered by 4 far worse criminals.
Well said.
Dot says, she said, I heard on a news bulletin that the policeman who killed the black guy, Mr. Floyd, they knew each other, as he was a security guard at a bar which the policeman attended, and also heard the victim was a Christian who did good work in his community. It's hard to know the truth. I mean, there's seems to be more and more coming out now, doesn't it, about him? He had recently got out of prison, I do know that, and has actually moved to Minneapolis looking for work and had really turned his life around. Is that what you understand?
Yes, but again, I don't think that we have total knowledge about the situation. And since I have been involved with prison ministry, drug and alcohol abuse, and so forth, for over 40 years myself, there are Christians who are in prison. There are people who become Christians in prison. It's not really the issue. The issue was that he was being arrested. He had allowed himself to be handcuffed. At that time, there was no fight left. Under police law, it should have stopped right then and there. There may have been something personal. We'll have to find out for sure later. But the fact of the matter is, he should never have been put to the ground, never have had that knee put on his neck for 8 minutes, period. It was utterly wrong. And the policemen who did it were acting in a criminal way.